Welcome to Echoes of Ihsan. Today, we're doing a deep dive into Sahih Muslim, specifically Book 43. And we're going to be looking at some commentary that really brings these hadiths to life. We have excerpts from all sorts of scholars, and we're going to be looking at stories, interpretations, and even some historical context of early Islam. It's really quite the treasure trove.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Book 43 is really fascinating because of how diverse it is. It doesn't just talk about rituals or legal rulings, but it really goes into
Yeah.
the complexities of faith, human behavior, the challenges that the early Muslims faced.
It's a lot more relatable than I initially expected. For example, there's this story about the people of Israel where they're instructed to enter a land and say hita to receive forgiveness. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? But they find a way to twist it. So what's the deeper meaning there?
Well, I think it's a really interesting example of the importance of sincerity, because hita literally translates to remove thou from us the burden of our sins. But they didn't approach it with any sort of humility or repentance. In fact, they turned it into something, almost mocking. Imagine instead of saying the word, they're entering the gate, dragging themselves on their backsides, mumbling something about grain. It just completely undermines the point.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to find a loophole. They're focusing on the letter of the law, but ignoring the spirit. So is that to say then that our outward actions are meaningless if they're not accompanied by genuine intention?
I think it really raises that question. This hadith, it's not just a historical anecdote. It's a reminder, I think, for all of us that true faith is more than just, lip service or rituals. It's about really aligning our outward actions with our inner state, approaching every act of worship with sincerity, humility.
So are we just going through the motions? Or are we truly present and sincere in our intentions?
Exactly. It's a challenge, I think, for every generation. But let's shift gears a little bit. There's another hadith that mentions a significant amount of revelation that the Prophet Muhammad received right before his death.
Yeah, that always stuck with me. Imagine, on the very day that he died, revelation was abundant. I mean, it must have been a very profound and emotional experience for those who were present.
Absolutely. I mean, the amount of revelation that he received in those final moments, it really suggests that sense of urgency. Like he really wanted to impart some crucial guidance before his departure. I mean, it's really a testament, I think, to his dedication to his mission and the weight of the message he carried.
Yeah, and it really paints a very human picture of him, even in his final moments. He was completely focused on conveying Allah's message to humanity, and it speaks volumes about his character and the significance that he placed on his role.
Now, here's an account that might surprise you. A Jewish man claimed that if a specific Quranic verse was revealed to his people, it would have been a cause for celebration. What do you think that verse could be?
Given the context, at the time there's a lot of tension between the emerging Muslim community and other groups. I would think it would have to be something that's perceived as
A declaration of
superiority, maybe, or dominance.
Well, the verse in question is, "Today I have perfected your religion for you and completed my favors upon you." And the timing of it is also important. This was revealed on the day of Arafat, the pinnacle of Hajj.
Wow. That's fascinating because from an Islamic perspective, obviously, this verse, it signifies the completion of Allah's guidance. But why would a Jewish man see this as a day of rejoicing?
It's all about perspective, right? And the historical context. This was a time of shifting power. And maybe some people interpreted this verse as the finality of the prophetic message, maybe an end to, the line of prophets that they believed in. It could have even been seen as a validation of their own beliefs.
Yeah.
Rather than
It's incredible how one verse can evoke such different reactions, depending on who's hearing it and their belief system. And, it's even further interesting because we see multiple hadiths mention this event, which kind of highlights how important it is.
It's like this ripple effect. Each retelling, it kind of solidifies its place within that narrative. Okay, so let's move on to another series of hadiths that deal with a sensitive topic, the interpretation of verses that are related to marrying orphan girls.
Right, and this is an area where I think it's really crucial to be careful because these verses have sometimes been misinterpreted to justify exploitation.
Absolutely. Aisha, the Prophet's wife, she provides a really important insight. She clarified that these verses, the main goal is to protect orphans, especially from exploitation, particularly from their guardians.
So it's not about encouraging marriage to orphans, but more about making sure that they're being cared for and protected from abuse.
Exactly. Imagine a scenario where you have a guardian enticed by an orphan's wealth or her beauty, and he marries her without giving her her due rights or paying a proper dowry. These verses, they're meant to prevent that kind of injustice. They're emphasizing the importance of treating orphans fairly,
Yeah.
protecting their interests, especially when it comes to such a sensitive topic like marriage.
Right, and this is a testament, I think, to the Islamic emphasis on social justice, the protection of those who are vulnerable. And it also highlights the role that women like Aisha played in providing context and nuance.
Yeah, absolutely. Their insights are really important to understanding the true spirit of these verses. Now, speaking of clarifying interpretations, there's a hadith that mentions how Muslims were commanded to seek forgiveness for the companions of the Prophet, while others reviled them. Why do you think there was such a stark difference?
Well, it suggests that even within the early community, there were divisions, different opinions. And I think that probably stems from the political and personal complexities that arose after the Prophet's death.
You're absolutely right. The early Muslims, they were united in their faith, but they weren't immune to, human things like power struggles, rivalries, different interpretations. This just reminds us, I think, that history is very rarely black and white.
It also makes you appreciate the idea of seeking forgiveness,
Yeah.
even for those who you disagree with. It speaks to a level of compassion and understanding.
Now let's talk about something that sparked a lot of debate, even among the early Muslims. There's this hadith about a verse from the Quran that says, killing a believer intentionally will lead to hellfire. Apparently there were differing opinions about this.
In Kufa,
That's interesting, because a statement like that seems pretty straightforward. So what were they disagreeing about?
well, Ibn Abbas, who's a renowned scholar, he clarified that this verse is still valid, meaning it wasn't abrogated, meaning it wasn't superseded or canceled out by a later revelation. But the discussion was probably more about the context, the specific conditions surrounding the act. So while the core principle of that verse is upheld, there are nuances to consider. Are there any examples mentioned in the commentary?
It doesn't give us specific examples, unfortunately, but Islamic law, it considers the totality of the Quran and Hadith when interpreting any single verse. So there might be other verses that address specific exceptions, like self-defense or during a just war.
So it's not about picking and choosing verses to fit our agenda, but it's about taking a holistic approach, understanding the context.
Exactly. And before we move on, what has resonated with you so far?
Honestly, it's the human element. It shines through. These aren't just, abstract teachings. They're stories about real people dealing with faith, making mistakes, trying to find understanding. It makes it more relatable, for you.
I think I'm drawn to the emphasis on intentionality, whether it's uttering hiddah with sincerity or understanding the rulings on marriage or social justice. It shows how important our intentions are.
That's really powerful. It's a good reminder to check our own intentions, make sure that they're aligned with the true spirit of our faith, ready to explore more.
Absolutely. Lead the way. So let's think about the final chapter of Revelation. Have you ever wondered which surah was the last one revealed in the Quran?
Oh, yeah. It's a pretty significant detail, it feels like, almost a final message.
It is a thought-provoking question. And the answer is Surah 110, which is titled, When Came the Help from Allah and the Victory?
That's interesting. It does seem fitting, considering it was revealed near the end of the Prophet's life.
Yeah.
As his mission was reaching its culmination.
Exactly. And, it really speaks to the ultimate triumph of truth and righteousness, which is something that we see throughout the Quran. It gives us that sense of hope and reassurance that even in the midst of struggles, divine support and victory are possible.
Yeah, it's like almost a message of encouragement, not just for the Prophet or his companions, but for all believers who are facing challenges.
No. Let's look at a story that highlights how important it is to interact peacefully, even when there's conflict or suspicion. This story, it involves a group of Muslims who killed someone who greeted them with,
Assalamu alaikum. And then they stole his sheep.
Wait, they killed someone who offered a peaceful greeting. That seems to go against everything Islam stands for.
It does. And this act led to the revelation of a verse that specifically forbids these actions. And the verse emphasizes the sanctity of life and how important it is to treat everyone with respect, regardless of, their beliefs or affiliations. It's a really strong reminder that our actions should reflect the core values of our faith, even when things are difficult.
It makes you think about the dangers of prejudice, making assumptions about other people just because somebody doesn't fit, or preconceived notions. It doesn't justify harming them.
Absolutely. And this story is a timeless lesson. And it's very relevant today when fear and misunderstanding often lead to, violence and discrimination. So it's a reminder to approach interactions with an open mind. Now, this next part focuses on this interesting practice that the Ansar had. They would enter their houses from the back after returning from pilgrimage. I've never heard of that. What's the significance?
Yeah, it is pretty unusual. And because of this practice, a verse was revealed that clarified that true piety. It's more than just rituals. It's about our ethical behavior. It's a reminder that faith isn't just about what you do outwardly or just following a set of rules. It's about your heart, your intention.
So it's not just about blindly following traditions, but about understanding, the deeper meaning, the principles behind them.
Exactly. It's about living with compassion, justice, kindness in all parts of your life, not just during specific rituals. This idea of inward piety versus outward action is really crucial for spiritual growth.
It's a constant journey of reflecting on ourselves and making sure our actions match up with our beliefs. Talk about self-reflection. There's a hadith that mentioned this 4-year gap between when people accepted Islam and when a verse was revealed expressing Allah's displeasure with the believer's lack of humility. Why was there that gap?
Yeah, 4 years it's a significant amount of time. And it shows how even those who are deeply devoted can sometimes stray. It reminds us that humility, it's an ongoing process. You need constant self-awareness and a willingness to admit when we're wrong.
Yeah, it's humbling. We usually think of humility as something you show, but this is about inner humility, recognizing that we depend on Allah, not being arrogant.
That's right. Humility is really important. It guides us towards sincerity and true compassion. Now, this next hadith talks about modesty in dress. It describes this pre-Islamic practice of women going around the Kaaba naked.
Wow, that seems completely against Islamic teachings on modesty. So what changed?
You're right, in. This practice led to a verse being revealed about how to dress at places of worship. It emphasizes how important modesty is, especially in sacred spaces. It signifies this shift toward a more dignified and respectful approach to religious rituals.
It's interesting how, a specific culture can lead to these verses that continue to shape our understanding of appropriate behavior, especially in religious settings.
It also shows how the Quran addresses social norms and provides guidance to elevate and refine human conduct. This next story is a tough one. It's about Abdullah b. Salul, who forced his slave girls into prostitution.
That's awful. I mean, exploiting someone who's so vulnerable is a terrible injustice.
It is, and because of this, a verse was revealed that forbids forcing slave girls into prostitution. This shows the Islamic stance against exploitation and protecting the vulnerable in society.
And this verse goes beyond just condemning that one act. It's about recognizing everyone's dignity, everyone's rights, no matter who they are or their circumstances. It's a powerful message, especially in a world with so much exploitation and trafficking.
That's an important point. It challenges us to see the humanity in everyone and to fight against anything that devalues or dehumanizes people. So let's look at a verse about seeking closeness to God. It says that even those who people call upon, like idols, they seek ways to reach Allah.
That's interesting. If those things are being worshipped, why would they want to reach the true God?
Ibn Masud explained that. This verse is about a group of jinn who accepted Islam while the people who worshipped them continued their misguided ways. It shows how universal Allah's power is and how everyone recognizes his authority, even if it's unconsciously.
So it's not that these entities are seeking Allah, but more about the truth of his power being recognized, even if it's on a deeper level.
Exactly. It reinforces the belief that God is one and there's no point worshiping anything other than the Creator. So now, let's think about the unique qualities of different surahs.
I've always been fascinated by how each surah has its own theme and message. Is there a way to understand these differences?
Well, Ibn Abbas gave us some insights. He said that Surah Tawbah is about exposing hypocrisy. Surah Anfal is about the Battle of Badr. And Surah Hajj focuses on the tribe of Banu Nadir.
That's amazing. When you understand the historical context, it really helps you unlock a deeper meaning and appreciation for it.
It's like putting together a puzzle. Each surah adds to the bigger picture of Allah's guidance and history unfolding. Now, let's talk about the prohibition of wine. There's a hadith where Umar gives a sermon about this. He specifically talks about the ingredients they used at that time.
Okay, that's interesting. What were the ingredients?
Well, he mentions grapes, dates, honey, wheat, and barley. But even more importantly, he emphasizes that what makes wine forbidden is that it clouds your mind. So it's not just about what's in it, it's about the effect it has on your judgment.
So the prohibition isn't just about the physical drink itself. It's more about the principle of protecting our reason and intellect so we can make good choices and live a righteous life.
Exactly. It shows the wisdom behind Islamic teachings, promoting what's good for you and protecting you from harm, physically and mentally.
A reminder that our faith guides us in all areas of life, not just rituals and beliefs, but also things that affect our well-being.
Okay, so this last hadith brings us to conflict, the clash between opposing sides. It mentions a verse about two adversaries arguing about their lore.
It sounds intense, like a struggle between belief and disbelief.
Abu Dar believed that this verse refers to the warriors who fought on both sides.
During the Battle of Badr.
Which was Badr.
You know, a major turning point in Islamic history. It shows how serious this struggle is between truth and falsehood. And this battle goes beyond any specific time or place.
It reminds us that this clash, it's always happening, both inside ourselves and around us. And we're constantly making choices. Do we align with truth and justice? Or do we give in to falsehood and oppression?
It's a message that tells us to be careful about our choices, to strive for righteousness, to be strong in our beliefs, even when things get hard. It's amazing, you know, how these hadiths and the commentary we've looked at from Sahih Muslim Book 43 really give us so much insight into the early Muslims.
It's like we went back in time and saw their struggles, their victories, and even their disagreements.
We saw examples of obedience and disobedience, the impact of revelation, and how they understood these complex issues.
Yeah, and it made me realize that even when you have divine guidance, human nature is always a factor. That's a good point. These stories show us that faith is something you live. It's not just ideas, but how we deal with being human and how society works.
One thing that really stuck out to me was how much they emphasized protecting the vulnerable people, like orphan slaves or those who are marginalized.
You're right. We saw how certain verses were about preventing the exploitation of orphans and condemned forcing slave girls into prostitution.
It shows how important social justice is in Islam and how we need to speak up against any kind of oppression, no matter who it's happening to.
It's a message that's still relevant today. It makes us look at our own societies and see if there are any systems or practices that are unfair.
Another thing that was interesting was how much emphasis there was on seeking knowledge and understanding.
We saw how people would go to the Prophet and his companions with questions, wanting to clarify things.
And it wasn't just about blindly accepting things, but really thinking about the text, trying to understand its meaning, and wanting to learn more.
That desire to learn is so important for us to grow, both as individuals and as a community.
It's a reminder that we should never stop learning and trying to understand.
We also saw examples of people having different opinions and interpretations, even among the companions of the Prophet.
It shows us that understanding religious texts is a process that continues. And even those closest to the Prophet had their own ways of seeing things.
It's important to have these discussions and to respect the different viewpoints within Islam.
It also makes us think critically and approach these complex topics with nuance.
As we finish up our deep dive into Sahih Muslim Book 43, what are some key things you'll take away from this?
I think it's a reminder that faith is more than just rituals or beliefs. It's about having good intentions, embodying things like compassion and justice, and always wanting to learn more and understand better.
I completely agree. These hadiths and commentaries give us a real picture of this community as they try to live by their faith and leave behind this wisdom for future generations.
It's been really insightful, full of discoveries and things to think about.
And for those listening, I encourage you to explore these texts yourselves. Think about what they mean and discover the wisdom they hold for all of us.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Echoes of Ihsan. Until next time, may your pursuit of knowledge and understanding continue to guide you